11 years in this kind of day and age in modern football is quite remarkable in some ways. Doesn't happen too often now, but I think it's fair to say that James Tavernier has split opinion at times, and over the years, I have to say I'm an unashamed Tav fan, but I'm not entirely disappointed with this news. We'll come to that maybe later on. What do you think his kind of legacy is going to be?
I mean, you're right to say, Douglas, that he's a guy that splits opinion. I must say, I'm with you. I think down the years he's been a fantastic servant at the club, and I feel for him in a way, because I think had he played for the club at any other sort of time in its history, he'd have been walking away right now with bundles and bundles of medals. I think I generally think that on his day he was as good as any of the sort of right backs that have that I've worn that jersey down the years. You're not top scorer in a Europa League, and help really lead from the front in terms of taking a team to a European final without being a proper player. Yes, I mean there'll always be people that will point to some perceived defensive deficiencies. I actually think he's a much better defender, or he was certainly when before the last couple of years when his legs started to fade a wee bit. But I think down the years you look at him in that run to Seville, defensively he was magnificent. He was as much a presence defensively that season as he was in an attacking force. When you think about the year before, you mentioned the league title winning season. He led a defence that conceded, I think was it 9 goals they conceded all season. I mean, it's
a few more than that, but
I think league season, I think it was 9. He conceded 9 goals all season. Am I being wrong?
No, I don't. I think it was near 15 odd.
Yeah, you maybe are right, but it's an incredible feat. That he did. What they did that season. He was part of that. He was a fundamental part of that. So for me, I think he should be remembered fondly. I mean, obviously the big detraction is the medal count. He's leaving here with, okay, he's completed the set, but it's one of each. And listen, he might get another one this year, another league winners medal this year. But there's no doubt that he over the course of 11 years will have expected and probably should have won a lot more than the 3 medals he has. So I can understand why there is an argument around him, but for me, I just think he's been so unfortunate in terms of timing. I think had he been around in the early 2000s, he'd be around in the 90s, he'd have played for those teams. He'd have been a big figure for those teams just with his attacking output, and he'd have certainly walked away with a far bigger medal haul.
Yeah, I've never really bought the kind of trophy haul thing. Tav's the least of our worries when it comes to trophies. If everyone, my argument's always been, if everyone was doing their job as well as Tav had for the past 11 years, he wouldn't be leaving with 3 trophies.
I mean, for me, the last couple of years, you can point to him for mistakes, and you can look at certain games and certain instances. I know that certainly Old Firm games latterly against sort of Maeda, especially when Dejan Maeda was probably at his peak in a Celtic jersey, he found him difficult. But that was at a point where I think Tavernier's legs were starting to fade. So you're up against a guy who's an energizer bunny, who's lightning quick. But what really let Rangers down in that period was not James Tavernier, it was the guys round about him and the poor recruitment. I mean, there was guys that simply weren't even up to James Tavernier's level. Okay, as I say, he's made mistakes, but I think there's been far more instances where James Tavernier has dug Rangers out of holes than put them in holes. So I really think that he's been a victim of sort of timing, a victim of misfortune, in the sense that he's it's mistakes of others that he's had to pay the price for. And the unfortunate thing with that also is that he's also been the poster boy for it. Unfortunately, he's been the guy who's had to go out and front up a lot of these lapses. He's had to go out and front up a lot of the disappointments. We all know the sort of catchphrase they had, that it's disappointing catchphrase that the Celtic fans have sort of lapped up across the city. So Unfortunately, he's had to go out and be the guy, the figurehead for so many disappointments. But as I say, I think it's harsh to point the finger at him and say he's the common denominator. I think, as I say, if, as you said rightly, if other people around about him had sort of operated at his level, Rangers would have done a lot more over the last 11 years.
I mean, I've got mates who openly refer to him as Captain Loser or Captain Failure, which I think is very, very harsh. Stephen, I'm pretty sure Steven Gerrard knows a thing or two about being a captain. I'm pretty sure Giovanni Van Bronckhorst knows a thing or two about being a captain, and they all trusted him with the armband. I've never really bought that. Defensive frailties, especially that kind of guys ghosting in at the back post. He never, even today, he still seems to struggle with that. I mean, it's very much a hill I'll die on that James Tavernier is certainly a modern day Rangers legend. I mean, you look back at some of the guys in the past, some of them didn't win loads of trophies over periods of time. In a team sport, I think it's not right to judge one player, when there's another 10 guys on the park with him at any one time. That being said, for me, the important thing is I think now is the right time. In fact, truth be told, the summer might have been the right time. I think the last few weeks, again, I mean, we've been here before with him. I've said before, I think his legs have gone and he's come back stronger. But I think this time, I just don't see him coming back now. I thought Falkirk targeted him a few weeks ago. I thought he looked really uncomfortable. Gives away a really silly penalty. For all, it would be great for Tav to leave by hoisting the league trophy. I don't actually particularly want to see him play much in these last 5 games. I'd much rather see Dujon Sterling there. And I think now, I actually think Tav's best position right now is probably centre half. I think he's probably handier there where he can see the game, and his reading of the game comes into it more. I just think at fullback, he's going to be targeted if he plays these last 5 games.
I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, there's been spells. I mean, I remember writing 2 years ago that it looked like he was sort of on, his powers were beginning to fade and he was on the wane. And then there's been times where you've rethought that. I mean, I remember the League Cup semi-final against Celtic earlier on this season. Obviously, the Rangers lost at the extra time, but that was a game, obviously, they were down to 10 men. And at that point, you really thought that this was Rangers were going to get run all over the top of in the second half. And I thought James Tavernier was one of the driving forces that get Rangers back into that game that day. I thought it was tremendous. I think he moved into midfield at one point, if I think rightly. I mean, for me, yeah, there's no doubt that he's 33, 34 now. His legs have definitely. I think you see him; he struggles to turn at times. I think if players run at him, he struggles to get back into position. But then I also think that when you take him out of the team, I think you see them. They lose a dimension. The quality of deliveries into the box isn't as good. The quality of free kicks, set piece, corner deliveries isn't as good. And I do think it's still a fairly young team, and there's not that many leaders in it. And like it or not, I mean, James Tavernier, okay, he's not for many people what they would call the sort of ideal or the sort of trademark vision of a Rangers captain, but he does lead in his own way, and it's usually by performances. So just in terms of how his contract situation was dealt with, I wouldn't have been against seeing him sign another 1-year deal. Again, not with the view of playing, probably nowhere near as much as he's played this season. I think obviously Max Allens was brought in last summer to sort of be the guy who sort of edged him out of the team, but he's just lived nowhere near up to sort of the standard required at Rangers. Dujon Sterling, as you say, has got the athleticism, can get up and down. Is probably a more switched on defender than Tavernier is, but you just can't rely on him to stay fit 1 week to the next. So James Tavernier's probably played more than he would have than any was envisioned this season. But I would have still kept him around for next year with maybe an eye to offer him, a coaching role further down the line. I would have given him on the basis that he can maybe play 10, 15 games a season, maybe have him in there just around the dressing room to be the guy that instills the standards and the rest of the teammates. But I get, he obviously gave the interview this week. Scott McDermott was there this week to speak to him at a William Hill event, and he says in his mind he can still play for another 4 years. What level that turns out to be, we'll see. I don't expect to see him staying in Scotland. I think you'll see him going back down south. I even think the Championship, just even watching last night, John Lundstrom's playing for Hull, did okay for Hull, but John Lundstrom's a good couple of years younger than James Tavernier, and I would imagine that I can't see him going down south and playing at that kind of level. So I just wonder if, obviously, at no point has there ever been a suggestion that a contract's been put on the table. Danny Rowe, when we spoke to him a few weeks ago about this, try to tease any sort of hint out of him whether or not a deal had been put in place, was very reluctant to get into the detail of it. So to me, it sounds like there's never really been a prospect of a contract materialising. So in that sense, it is obviously best for him shake hands and move on. For me, the interesting thing will be see what sort of reception he gets from the Rangers fans. As you say, as somebody splits opinion, he's been here 11 years. He's due by rights a testimonial that never materialised. I'm just wondering if that will be something that the club arranges for the summer. We saw Alan McGregor a couple of years ago. He was the last Rangers player to get a testimonial sort of arranged after his retirement had been announced, and he obviously came back to play 45 minutes against Newcastle at Ibrox. I'm just wondering if there's any way in which the club can honour him in that way. But because for me, he definitely deserves it. Okay, as we said, he's not won as many medals as he probably thought he would have, that he probably should have. But as I believe is that I don't think that's all entirely down to him. I think he's been let down by the people upstairs. I think he's been let down by some teammates on occasion. So I think that there's he's definitely deserving of a proper send-off, and that for me would be a proper testimonial come the summer.
I wonder if a testimonial might depend on how the next 5 games go, because I think kind of talk of one last season gets shelved as we were at the time we were losing the Scottish Cup to Queen's Park and whatnot. So, I mean, we know Ibrox can be an unforgiving place when things aren't going well. James Tavernier will know that more than most. I mean, just to kind of finish it off, one thing I'd say about him, his fitness levels have been incredible for 11 years. Barely missed a game.
Yeah.
I think, people talk about bravery. For me, his bravery on the ball has been second to none. He's always been the guy trying to drive us forward, even when he's going through poor games. He's never hid. I don't think he's ever hidden as a Rangers captain. And he certainly leaves with my best wishes. But I do think now is the time to kind of end this particular chapter.